Hello, everyone, and welcome to the sideboard of the Philadelphia Standard Open. I'm Glenn Jones, joined by Dave Shiels.
How's it going?
Dave, welcome to the sideboard.
Thank you.
You played for today a blue-white control deck, and I actually have seen this deck. I've been on the wrong side of it a couple times on Magic Online, actually. Great Destini's been savaging me whenever we encounter each other in the two-mans, and he's playing this blue-white control deck. Runs Nephalia Drowning Under the kill. You're just splashing black for that and nothing else.
Yep.
And why don't you take me through the deck? What attracted it to you? What attracted you to it, I should say, as opposed to blue, white, red control or Esper?
Well, I've been playing blue, white, red for as long as I can remember. It's always been my pet deck, and as of late, a lot of the blue, white, red decks have been gravitating more towards a control deck. They've been cutting a lot of the creatures and playing things like Aetherling as their kill, or very small amounts of creatures, and being much more of a control deck. And I didn't really like the direction that took the deck in, so I was kind of like resisting that. I was sticking with my creature heavy blue, white, red deck. I still really liked Reckoner in that deck, but I wanted to. When I saw this deck, it made me think control was much more of an option. I don't really like the way Aetherling fits into the blue, white, red shells. I don't really like the way that the mana base is for the deck. A lot of your lands can come into play tapped a lot. It can hurt you a lot of the time.
Yeah.
With this deck, your mana is very good. You get to play a lot of basic lands. They always come into play untapped. I think the biggest thing that put this deck on the top was Terminus. That was the big new card. I've always been a huge fan of sweepers in Standard for the past 6 months, and Terminus is just really good right now. Putting the creatures on the bottom of the deck is really important. It doesn't trigger
Voice of
Resurgence. It doesn't trigger Blood Artist. It keeps creatures out of the graveyards for Unburial Rites, which is really important. And it gives you the inevitability of the game with Nephalia Drownyard. So it's very similar to Aetherling and Drownyard are very similar in that they both cost a lot of mana. They both take a little while, but they both are, give you a lot of inevitability. It's just this one allows you to tap for mana and do stuff more in the early game.
Yeah, I agree that Terminus is the most attractive option about this deck by far. I was playing Aristocrats against Destini. That's why he was annihilating me. It was just even hard casting Terminus is enough.
And that is probably one of your best matchups. You really want to play against either one of the Aristocrat decks. Doesn't really matter too much which one, but it's really good against them.
As the icing on the cake in that matchup, you also have access to Renounce the Guilds. It's obviously much stronger, I think, against the white, black, red versions than the green, white, black versions on account of Voice of Resurgence, but it's still very good because it's one of the few cards in the format that can actually kill a Cartel Aristocrat.
It is. It's one of the few cards that can kill Cartel Aristocrat. It's really good at dealing with Falcon Wrath Aristocrat, which is a card that I haven't always had the easiest time dealing with playing blue, white, red. I know you do have a good amount of answers to it. It's just the games where you do lose, that card is usually a pillar of it. So I was a little bit worried about the deck with the amount of haste creatures that are being played right now. Thundermaw Hellkite's still one of the best cards in Standard, and this deck doesn't have that many ways to interact with it at instant speed. But I think the sweepers are enough to keep you at a high enough life total to.
Sure. I think that also you wind up having to sandbag Azorius Charm a little bit more than you might in blue, white, red or Esper, where that card gets cycled a lot really quickly. This deck, it is one of those few instant speed ways you have to interact. You need to hang on to it.
Azorius Charm is much better in this deck than it is in blue, white, red. Just with blue, white, red, you have so much redundancy. You have so many cheap burn spells that do a very similar thing to Azorius Charm, whereas in this deck, it fills a role that no other card does, other than Renounce the Guilds. So it's one of the only cheap ways you have to interact with them early.
Sure.
And being able to use the Wraths to clear away some of the less strong gold cards, and then being able to use your Renounce to kill things like the Aristocrat or Domirad is also a really problematic threat. So being able to wrap the board and then kill that is really important.
All right, well, let's shift over to the sideboard. The reason I actually latched onto Destini's deck in the first place was I really wanted a deck that could board Rest in the Peace once the Aristocrat deck started taking off, as that card's obviously devastating against them, and it also has applications in other matchups, specifically Reanimator.
Sure. So
it just seemed like a great time to be playing the card. And Destini's deck gets to do that. It doesn't use Snapcaster Mage. It doesn't need to have the flashback on Think Twice. Obviously it wants it, but it's not game breaking if you have to just cycle your Think Twices. So that was really attractive as a sideboard card. The other interesting one, Debtor's Pulpit, which we saw that one start catching on at the Block Pro Tour as a solution to Aetherling. I take it that's what it's doing here as well?
I don't actually think Aetherling and Cavern are that strong of a combo in Standard, but I knew other people thought that they were good, so I was like a little bit scared because of how long it takes you to kill somebody with Drown Yard. They're going to have all the time in the world to set that up, and there's not really a good way to answer it. I also was a little bit worried about somebody having too many haste creatures. Like, if I have a bunch of Wraths and they just like play a Thunder Maw and hit me for 5 and then I Wrath it, my life total could get a little bit low.
Right.
And Pulpit's just like really good at like it's good against haste creatures and Aetherling, and it's really good at like forcing them to commit more to the board to just make these 6 or 7 Wrath effects that we have carry their weight.
Yeah, sure. Plays it right into your sweepers.
Yep.
And the last card on the sideboard I want to talk about, I admit that I didn't actually know he was running this one until I saw a Moto deck list, but Kraken Hatchling.
Yeah. So one of the big problems is the only real card that I really missed when I played going from Blue White Red to this is Pillar Flame. Voice of Resurgence is like pretty awkward card to deal with until you get to your Wraths, and Kraken Hatchling is just like a cheap way. You just can proactively play it on turn 1 or turn 2, and then it just can sit there and it can just block. It blocks voice. It makes the voice not deal that much damage to you, so then they're forced to commit more to the board, and then you get way more value out of your Wrath.
It soaks a ton of damage. The most recent analog I can even think of is something like Wall of Omens, which obviously was much better considering it can't.
Sure, yeah.
But considering the pace of Standard today contrasted with then, maybe coming down a turn earlier, it's not even necessarily worth as different from a card as you'd think.
Yeah.
You have to deal with decks like Naya Blitz that are just making like 3/3s on turn 2 or 3 at the latest.
Yeah, it's great to just be able to just play it too. It's similar to Pillar of Flame in that it's like a cheap answer to these early threats that just like allows me to get to my more powerful late game spells. But it's kind of sweet in the fact that like if I'm on the play, I can just play it on turn 1, and it allows me to then block their creatures and still like use my Think Twices for value more.
Capitalizing on the fact that your lands come into play untapped right there is really key.
Absolutely, yeah. Another big thing is that the deck doesn't play Snapcaster Mage, which is a card that I always found recently I thought was overrated a little bit. It's just like costs a good amount of mana. There's not always that many spells that you want to flash back. Usually at the point of the game when I got to Snapcaster Mage, it was like I was already like pretty far ahead. I felt like it was like a little bit of a win more. So like now that I don't have Snapcaster Mage, I was able to play 4 Think Twice. And Think Twice is like one of my favorite cards in Standard. It like helps me reliably hit my land drops. It's like a 2 and a 3 drop. So like against the aggro decks, I'm able to like leave in a few of my Think Twices because I have things like Kraken Hatchling that I can just play. I don't have to wait until they play a creature to invest my mana. I can go turn 1 Kraken Hatchling and I can play a Think Twice and flash it back on turns 2 and 3 and play into a Wrath.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, Think Twice is really key in these decks. Just to make your land drops, you are a mana-hungry strategy. Well, Dave, thanks for joining me and giving me a rundown on this new version of Blue-White, I guess black. It's not really an Esper deck, but we are drowning people. So.
Just Blue-White control. Just drowning people out.
Yeah, thanks for joining me.
Thanks a lot.